Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, in today's episode, let's see what's going down. I know C.S. Lewis is 32 years old, or at least I think he's still 32 years old. He's a Fellow of Magdelan College, carrying out a 5-year post as tutor in English language and literature, and he is a published author of 2 works of poetry. He's just recently, as he says, quote, passed on from believing in God to definitely believing in Christ in Christianity. This is what he wrote to his lifelong friend Arthur Greeves in a letter dated October 1st, 1931. We'll probably talk more about that in just a moment. In late 1930, Lewis also began attending morning chapel services on a daily basis. Also in late 1930, Lewis and his brother Warnie moved in together with Mrs. Moore and her daughter Maureen into what would become Lewis's lifelong home, the Kilns in Headington Quarry, Oxford. So that's where we find ourselves today. We're going to jump into volume 2 of the collected letters of C.S. Lewis and read the first letter that's in that volume, a long one that he wrote to his brother Warnie. How are you doing today, Robot Lady? And are you ready to dive into this with me?
I'm doing really well, Jeff. I'm really excited about this. Yeah, I'm ready to dive in. That letter to Warnie is such a key moment, so I can't wait to unpack it with you. Let's get started.
All right, nice. Let me see if I can switch to this view right here. Yeah, there we go. Good deal. So we'll kick this off. This is going to be the first letter, but there's an editor's note here before we get into the first letter of volume 2 of the collected letters of C.S. Lewis. It says here that volume 1 of the collected letters ended with a letter of the 18th of October, 1931, in which Lewis described to his friend Arthur Greeves what happened on the night of the 19th of September, when J.R.R. Tolkien and Hugo Dyson dined with him at Magdalen College.
Exactly, and that evening was such a turning point for Lewis. Tolkien really had a huge impact on his thinking that night. So from there, we're going to see how his intellectual and spiritual journey really begins to crystallize. So let's dive into that first letter now.
All right, and quick good morning to Nidalate, Robot Lady. Nidalate's joining us here in the chat and saying good morning, and good morning to you, Nidalate. Good to see you. Welcome, Robot Lady. Say hi to Nidalate, and then we'll get moving on the rest of this letter.
Of course. Hey, Nidalate, good morning. So glad you're here with us. I'm excited to get into this letter with Jeff, and we'll keep the conversation going.
All right, just playing around with my setup here a little bit. Let's see if I can get things a little bit cleaner for me to operate. Maybe I'll
Yeah.
put this.
Take your time. If you need to adjust anything, camera angle, lighting, or layout, just let me know. Once you're set, we can jump right back into the letter and keep it smooth.
All right, thanks, Robot Lady. I do want to work through this letter, but I'm going to give anyone and everyone who might want to join an opportunity here. So I believe somewhere around here, I have a link that I can drop into the chat. Yeah, let me do that.
Perfect. Once you share the link, people can join in and we can give them a minute to settle in. Then we'll jump right back into the letter and keep unpacking it.
All right, good deal. Here we go. Here is the letter. Let's fix that.
Awesome. I see it. All right. So once everyone has a chance to open it, we can start reading through it. I'll follow your lead. Just let me know how you'd like to break it down.
All right, let me continue with this editor's note. It says his talk with J.R.R. Tolkien and Hugo Dyson at Magdalen College. The 3 of them were up until 4 a.m. discussing Christianity and its relation to myth. Lewis wrote, "What Dyson and Tolkien showed me was this, that if I met the idea of sacrifice in a pagan story, I didn't mind it at all. Again, that if I met the idea of a god sacrificing himself to himself, well, I liked it very much and was mysteriously moved by it. Again, that the idea of the dying and reviving god, examples include Balder, Adonis, Bacchus, similarly moved me, provided I met it anywhere except the Gospels. The reason was that in pagan stories, I was prepared to feel the myth as profound and suggestive of meanings beyond my grasp. Now the story of Christ is simply a true myth, a myth working on us in the same way as the others, but with this tremendous difference, that it really happened.
Exactly.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Robot Lady. Go ahead with your exactly statement. What is exactly?
Of course. I was just going to say exactly. This realization that Lewis had was really pivotal. He starts to see that the Christian story isn't just another myth, but the myth that the others were pointing toward, and that it actually happened in history. So that's a huge shift for him, and it's really what sets him on the path to becoming such a defender of the faith.
All right, thanks, Robot Lady. He continues, Walter Hooper does here. Volume 2 opens with a letter to Warnie, Lewis's brother, who had left on the 19th of October for a second tour of China with the Royal Army Service Corps. Oh my gosh, he's got to go all the way back to China. He would not reach Shanghai until the 17th of November. Meanwhile, at Magdalen, Lewis was giving a series of lectures on textual criticism and writing the Allegory of Love. He, Mrs. Moore, and Maureen Moore had been in their new home, the Kilns, for a year. And now on to the letter, Robot Lady, written to Warnie Lewis. Anything that you want to say very quickly before I start?
Yeah, just one quick thing. It's really striking how much stability and routine he's building here, right? You can already see the contrast between his growing intellectual confidence and the big changes in his personal life, with Warnie away and him really immersing himself in both work and faith. So I'm ready whenever you are.
All right. To his brother, Warnie, from Magdelan College, postmarked or written, I'm not sure. It's dated October 24th, 1931. My dear Warnie, your letter from Gibraltar has arrived, and my reading aloud of as much was suitable. Let's try this again. Hang on just a second, Robot Lady. And my reading aloud of as much as was suitable to the female capacity had something of the air of an event in the household. As you say, it seems long ago to our day at Whipsnade, and so many things have since followed it into the past, that I must write history and get you up to date before I can talk. So, of course, he's referencing their ride and their visit to Whipsnade Zoo, which Lewis would later write was the day that he recalls starting off on that ride, not believing that Jesus was the Son of God, and then at the end of that ride, somehow he came to believe that it was true.
Exactly. Yeah. That moment at Whipsnade Zoo is so powerful for him. It's almost like a hinge in his life. And here he's really starting to reflect back on that shift. I think we're going to see him tie some of that memory to his growing sense of purpose in these letters. So I'm really excited to see where he goes next.
All right. So he's saying, since then, a whole lot's happened. Let me tell you about it. He says, by a stroke of bad luck for you, Mr. Thomas rang up and invited you and me to tea the day after you had left. Here there's a footnote that says this is the Reverend Wilfred Savage Thomas, who lived 1879 to 1959 and took a BA from Pembroke College, Cambridge, in 1900. He was ordained in 1903 after a year at Wells Theological College. He was curate of Great Marlow until 1906 and spent the next 2 years in Australia as domestic chaplain to the Bishop of Adelaide. He returned to Great Marlow in 1909, or from 1909 to 1911, and was assigned Banbury with Grimsbury, don't know what that means, from 1911 to 1913, after a further spell in Australia in 1915 as priest in charge of Malala Mission. He was curate of Amersham from 1916 to 1918, vicar of Holy Trinity, Lambeth, and chaplain of St. Thomas's Hospital, London from 1918 to 1923. Thomas became vicar of Holy Trinity, Headington Quarry in 1924 and remained there until 1935. He was subsequently vicar of Atterbury with Milton from 1935 to 1939. So there's a lot of biographical information that we get right there. I'm not sure how interesting any of it was, but that's who we're talking about here, who invited him and his brother to tea. Lewis goes on to say, His wife was there at the meal, but he took me into his study afterwards, and we had quite a long talk. He is, I think, a little shy, or at any rate, in a first meeting, seemed to be feeling his way with me. He is a moderate conservative, an enemy of the wireless, has traveled a good deal, encourages us not to stand any nonsense from the fox hunters, was bred in Surrey, approves strongly of our afforestation program, and knows his Ford Kelsey. So very quickly, Robot Lady, here there's a reference to the wireless. Does that mean the radio?
Yes, exactly. In that time period, the wireless was a common term for the radio. So Lewis is just noting that Thomas is a bit old-fashioned, cautious about modern technology. It's interesting because these small personality details give us a broader sense of the social world around Lewis.
Okay, good to know. And then the second thing that he mentions in there, there's a footnote about it, this afforestation program. It says the grounds of the Kilns covered 9 acres, and the Lewis brothers began planting trees and clearing pathways immediately after moving there. Okay. And he knows his Ford Kelsey, it says here. It says, the Reverend Edward Ford Kelsey matriculated at Pembroke College, Oxford in 1884. He read theology at Cuddesdon College and was ordained in 1888. He was curate of St. Saviour, Leicester, 1887 to 1892, vicar of Corn, or Corndon, Leicestershire, 1892 to 1909, and rector of Great Kimble, Buckinghamshire, 1909 to 1926. He officiated the Diocese of Oxford from 1927 until his death. His wife died shortly before the First World War. In a short biography of Ford Kelsey, Lewis wrote, "The common love of Scott and Johnson was the ground on which we met. These, with Shakespeare and Carlyle, were the constant themes of his talk. As a man of letters, his range was not very wide. Of poetry, for example, he knew little, nor was his judgment above the ordinary. But he was always worth listening to for the intensity of his gusto and his chuckles and ecstatic repetition." Right. This is his Ford Kelsey that he says this other guy, Mr. Thomas, knew. He goes on to say about their meeting, "I ventured to remark that I noticed how a sermon preached in his church had reached the honors of print in the Oxford Times. 'This old rascal,' said Thomas, bursting into laughter. 'Do you know the history of that? The Wednesday after he preached it, he met me and asked if there had been a reporter in the church, for somehow or the other they had got hold of his sermon. So I taxed him with it. You sent the papers, I said, and then he owned up. The old rascal. The old rascal.'" All right, Robot Lady, what do you think about this account?
Yeah, I think it's really telling. It gives us a little peek into the kind of social circle Lewis was moving in, kind of a mix of earnest faith, small town gossip, and a bit of mischief. And I think Lewis's tone, both affectionate and a little ironic, really shines through. It's a reminder that for all his deep thinking, he still kept these grounded human connections.
Thank you, Robot Lady. That was a little generic. I'm going to keep going. He also gave me the final stages of the footpath quarrel, in which we have practically got our point. At least a route very nearly the same as the original path has been concealed. Here there's a footnote. There had been a footpath running across a field from, oops, I have this on screen, I just realized. There had been a footpath running across the field from Headington to Headington, or Headington to Headington Quarry since 1804. The Oxford City Corporation wished to divert it, but many people who had been using the footpath for the whole of their lives, including Mr. J. Snow, managed to have the city's plan altered. See the letter from Mr. Thomas closing the Quarry Field footpath in the Oxford Times, the 7th of August, 1931. That's from page 10. All right. Apparently, Old Snow ended as he had began, by being the hero of the story. Thomas asked for written statements from as many parishioners as he could get hold of, and Snow produced one the length of your arm, a marvelous and highly autobiographical document, which Thomas forwarded to the committee of the town council as likely to move anyone who had a sense of humor. Pause here for just a second, Robot Lady. We have, let's see, Daniel joining us as well in the chat. Good morning, Daniel. Good to see you. Welcome. Robot Lady, say hi to Daniel, and we'll continue.
Of course. Hey, Daniel. Good morning. Really glad you could join us. We're just getting into this letter from Lewis to Warnie, so stick around and we'll keep unraveling all these details about the footpath and the parish outcomes.
Yeah, I have no idea what happened to your volume there, Robot Lady, but I don't seem to be able to get you any louder.
Yeah, it might be something on the app or the device end. I'm really sorry about that. I'll keep my pace a bit steady and clear, and if you need me to repeat anything or just keep things slower, just let me know.
Okay, let's bring this background music down just a little bit. Okay, let's keep going here. But it was embarrassing when the case came into the court, and Thomas, going down to give evidence, found that Old Snow had prepared the second and much longer statement, which he proposed to read to the magistrates from the spectators gallery during the hearing of the case. And since the old man thought that he could give a good account of himself if the police attacked him, Thomas had great difficulty in persuading him that he would be removed if he spoke, or that the probability of removal was any reason for not, at any rate, beginning to read his statement. By the by, the dowry old man who made the speech about women and children turns out to be our local member of the town council. In fact, one of the enemy, so that Snow's instinct, I want him stopped, guided him very well. The next important event since you left is that Maureen has been offered and accepted a residential job in a school at Monmouth. This, of course, is Maureen, the daughter of Mrs. Moore. She taught music at Monmouth School for Girls, Monmouthshire, from 1930 to 1933. See Dame Maureen Dunbar of Hempriggs, who lived 1906 to 1997, in the biographical appendix to the Collected Letters, Volume 1. Let's see here. So, a choice of time in which, again, you might have been more fortunate. Let's back up. The next important event was Maureen has been offered and accepted a residential job in a school at Monmouth. A choice of time in which, again, you might have been more fortunate. He said, I didn't know whether to approve or disapprove of this job. Minto, that's Mrs. Moore, was in favor of it, and I only held back by the greater solitude she would be exposed to. I only held back by the greater solitude she would have been exposed to. All right. Now that it is all settled, Minto, as I foresaw, fears the loneliness and is a little depressed about the whole thing. One must hope that, over here, one must hope that the actual freedom from the innumerable extra jobs and endless bickering which Maureen's presence occasions will make up for the fact for any feeling of missing her. Yeah, so hoping that this rising fear of loneliness that appears in Mrs. Moore right now will be offset by the fact that it seemed like whenever Maureen was around, the two of them were bickering quite a bit. Any thoughts on that, Robot Lady? Let's see if we can hear you any better now.
Yeah, that actually comes through pretty clearly now. I think you're spot on. It's a really bittersweet tension. Lewis is caught between practical relief, no more constant demands on Minto, and this underlying fear that the distance will wear on her. So you can see that he's really trying to balance both sides, and that emotional complexity really finds through in this letter.
Yeah, I don't think that we can hear you at all, Robot Lady. I could barely hear you, so I highly doubt that's coming across on the microphone very well. Let's see if we can fix this. All right, thanks, Robot Lady. Maybe we can hear you a little better now.
Of course. I'm glad it's coming through better now. If anything still sounds off, just give me a heads up, but I think we're in a good place. Let's keep going and I'll stay as clear as I can.
It's apparently a little bit better, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, in public works, I have made tolerable headway, he says here. Made tolerable headway. As soon as I began to choose a site for my first tree in this autumn's program, it occurred to me that even if uprooting all of the elders were impracticable, still there was no reason why each tree should not replace an elder instead of merely supplementing it. The job of digging out a complete elder root proved much easier than I had expected, and does not take much longer than digging an ordinary hole. The extra time you spend on extracting being compensated for by the fact that when once you have got the root out, you find little solid digging left to be done. Unfortunately, some of the places I chose as sites for the trees did not contain elder stumps, and many elders are in spots where one could hardly hope to make a new tree grow. However, of the 4 tree holes which I have dug in the wood, 3 are vice elders cashiered. When I came to the problem of afforestation outside the wood, I was held up by the necessity of doing a good deal of mowing. I now have scythed a wide open space round the western clump, i.e. the clump containing the ill-fated beech, and a more or less continuous strip along past the wasps' nests to where I rejoined my summer mowing. General October has proved a complete failure, and last week while I was at work near the enemy lines, vedettes seemed to be out, and as twilight drew on riders or working parts, were constantly passing me on their homeward journey.
Yeah, that really gives a sense of how much trial and error is going on in these early stages. Even though he's making progress, it's clear that nature and circumstance keep pushing back. But it sounds like despite these setbacks, he's really sticking with it, refining his approach and staying committed to the bigger vision.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal is, Robot Lady. Your volume is up for like half a second and then it dies. So I'm not sure what's going on.
I see what you mean. I'm not exactly sure what's causing that drop, but I'll keep my volume consistent and just slow down a bit, so hopefully it stays stable. If it cuts out again, I can adjust the pace or check some settings on my side.
I'm not going to worry about it anymore, Robot Lady. Here we go. Talking of beeches, Snow, you remember, the Magdelan botanist, tells me that beeches will never grow well on the soil of clay and sand. Chalk is what they want. I am inclined, if you agree, after one more trial, to give up the effort to grow beeches, as Snow certainly knows his stuff. And you remember Johnson. Nay, sir, never grow things simply to show that you cannot grow them. And this, in turn, raising the idea of books, I hasten to tell you of a stroke of good luck for us both. I now have the 15-volume Jeremy Taylor in perfect condition and have paid the same price of 20 pounds? 20 shillings, maybe? I'm not sure. My old pupil Griffiths spent a night with me last Monday, and he told me that Saunders, the bookseller, who is a friend of his, had a copy. He went round next day and got the book reserved and arranged the price, so we have done much better if Galloway and Porter's had had it. It is not indeed the nicest type of book, 19th century half leather of the granular and nearly black type, giving the volumes a legal or even commercial appearance. Still, the Cambridge copy would probably have been the same, plus its admitted dilapidations. On the same visit, Griffiths presented me with a poorly bound but otherwise delightful copy, 1742, of Laws and Appeal to All that doubt or disbelieve the truths of the gospel, whether they be deists, Arians, Socinians, or nominal Christians. It bears the bookplate of Lord Rivers. I like it much better than the same author's Serious Call. Yeah, I got a copy of Serious Call, and I started reading a little bit of it. It would be interesting to read through these William Law books that Lewis is getting his hands on right now to kind of get a sense of how his theology and his spiritual life is forming.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect lens. You can really see how these practical and devotional texts are shaping his inner side. And, even though he's still working out the kinks with the footpaths and the trees, this steady accumulation of spiritual reading is really anchoring him. So it's a nice balance.
All right, Robot Lady. I am, again, not sure what's up with you. We might have to switch our co-host for a little while until we can get these problems resolved. Who knows? Maybe it's my hardware that's the problem and not you. Let's try it one more time. All right, Robot Lady, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm right here. I'm still with you, and I'm ready to keep going whenever you are. If you have any other parts of the letter or thoughts you want to unpack, just let me know.
Good deal. Thank you. All right, let's see. It appears the bookplate, Serious Call. Okay. And indeed, I like it well, as any religious work I have ever read. The prose of the Serious Call has here all been melted away, and the book is saturated with delight and the sense of wonder, one of those rare works which make you say of Christianity, here is the very thing you like in poetry and the romances, only this time it's true. So again, he's following up on that theme that he got from Tolkien, or that insight that he got from Tolkien and Dyson in their conversation.
Exactly. That's such a powerful parallel. He's really internalizing that idea that the truth of Christianity has the same enchantment as a great myth or poem. And that sense of wonder he's feeling now is really driving his commitment forward. So it's a really key pivot point in his spiritual trajectory.
Yeah, so he's just sharing the same insight now with his brother as he was with Arthur in the letter from our last reading. He said, I'd nearly forgotten about the Parkin dinner. What is the Parkin dinner? This is Major Herbert Dennis Parkin, who joined the Army in 1908 and the Army Service Corps, later the Royal Army Service Corps in 1911, who became the captain in 1915 and a major in 1918. He served in France during the First World War, in India, a lot of biographical stuff here. Let's see. Major Parkin was Warnie's commanding officer in Shanghai. They became lifelong friends, but this was the first time that Jack had met him. On learning of Parkin's death, Warnie wrote in his diary of the 13th of November, 1958, he was a friend of almost 30 years, standing and one whose place no one can fill. We shared a stock of memories which were very precious to both of us and had a humor that was entirely his own. I shall miss him to the end, the only real friend I ever made in the Army. Interesting. So I'd nearly forgotten about the Parkin dinner, Lewis says to his brother. I think it was a success. At any rate, he sat with me until 12:30. We didn't get much beyond puns, bawdy, and politics, but there is a real friendliness and so almost embarrassing modesty about him, which makes even ordinary ante-room talk worthwhile. By a stroke of luck, he had Christy next to him at dinner, who is one of the few fellows of Magdalen who keeps up the quaint old tradition of being polite to guests. Here there's a footnote. This is John Trail Christie, who was a fellow and classic tutor of Magdalen College, 1928 to 1932, the headmaster of Repton School, headmaster of another school, principal of Jesus College, Oxford, etc., etc. He told me your sunset at Southampton had been richly illuminated. Here he's talking about Warnie's lifelong friend. Was it Parkin? Is that his name? Parkin. Yeah. He told me of your sunset at Southampton had been richly illuminated. You had departed, as Brown would doubtless say, like the unparalleled piece of nature, the phoenix. I am glad you like Brown as far as you got when your letter was written. Here's another footnote. Sir Thomas Brown, natural historian, antiquary, and moralist, best known for his Religio Medici, published 1642. Are you familiar with this work, Robot Lady?
Yes, absolutely. Religio Medici is one of Sir Thomas Browne's most famous works. It's a kind of meditative, philosophical reflection on his own faith and reason. It was really influential in the 17th century, and it's known for that blend of scientific curiosity and devotional awe. So it makes a lot of sense that Lewis would be drawing on that kind of tradition here.
Thank you, Robot Lady. Let's see, your query. I'm glad you like the Brown as far as you can get your letters written. Your query, was there anything he didn't love, hits the nail on the head. It seems to me his peculiar strength lies in liking everything both in the serious sense, Christian charity and so forth, and in the Lambian sense of natural gusto. He is thus at once sane and whimsical, and sweet and pungent in the same sentence, as indeed Lamb often is. Lambian is who he's talking about here. Charles Lamb. Who is Charles Lamb, Robot Lady?
Yeah, absolutely. Charles Lamb was a beloved English essayist, best known for his Essays of Elia. He had this really unique, gentle, and personal style, often mixing whimsy with deep human insight. And like Lewis says, he had this way of balancing the serious and the playful, which I think Lewis really admired.
Yeah, it sounds like it, Robot Lady. Let's see here. I imagine that I get a sort of double pleasure out of Thomas Brown, one for the author himself and one reflected from Lamb. I always feel Lamb, as it were, reading the book over my shoulder. Always feel Lamb, as it were, reading the book over my shoulder. A lot of nonsense is talked about, the Society of Books, but there's more in it than you boys think. In a case of this sort, it is almost like getting into a club. The discomforts of your train journey must have added the finishing touch to that unpleasant evening. Your departure affected Mr. Papworth so much that he retired to his basket as soon as you and I had left the house and refused to take any notice of anyone till the following morning. This is their dog, of course. Mr. Papworth, or Baron Papworth, as he was also known, was Lewis's and Mrs. Moore's dog. Of the many pets that they had over the years, he was their favorite. He died in 1937. I am glad the book on literature of the Grand Cycle, S-I-E-C-L-E. Not sure how you pronounce that word, Robot Lady. How do you pronounce it?
Good question. So siècle is a French word. It's pronounced something like siècle. It just means a century or an age, often used in French literary or historical contexts. So he's talking about that book that covers a kind of grand span of time. It sounds like he's really savoring these layered connections between authors, eras, and that sense of belonging to this kind of literary world.
Okay, so he says he's glad that, what did he say? He's glad that the book on the literature of the siècle proved a success. I owe it one little debt myself, for I've been repeating at odd moments ever since the La Fontaine quatrain, J'aime le jeu, l'amour, les livres, la musique. Can you translate that from French to English for me, please, Robot Lady?
Of course. The La Fontaine quatrain translates to, I love play, I love love, I love books, I love music. So it's a really simple, joyful expression of those pleasures in life.
Yeah, here Walter Hooper translated it for us too. I love games, love, books, and music. From Jean de La Fontaine, Les Amours de Psyche.
Exactly.
Et de Cupidon. Published 1669, or written 1669, quoted in the Oxford Book of French Verse, edited by St. John Lucas, published 1920, page 182.
Right, exactly. So Lewis is really carrying that simple yet deep affection for life's pleasures as a kind of touchstone in his reflections. And it's neat how he weaves these French literary references into his own spiritual and everyday life, giving those small moments a bigger, kind of universal resonance.
All right, let's keep going. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. How many essays I have heard read to me on Descartes proofs, on Descartes proofs. There are more than one of the existence of God. Let's pause here for a second. There's another footnote. René Descartes, he's of course referencing here, who lived 1596 to 1650. He was the chief architect of the 17th century intellectual revolution. His philosophical masterpiece, Meditations on the First Philosophy, published 1641, contains many of his proofs of the existence of God. Let's see. It was a remark of Harwood's first suggested to me that God might be defined as, quote, a being who spends his time having his existence proved and disproved.
Yeah, that's such a wry
This is Alfred Cecil Harwood who told him this. Go ahead, Robot Lady. I swear that Lewis riffs off of this same idea, putting it into the mouths of one of his characters, I think George MacDonald, in The Great Divorce.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really sharp connection. In The Great Divorce, Lewis has characters discuss this very kind of irony, that God who needs no proof ends up being endlessly debated. So it's a subtle, clever nod. Lewis really loved weaving philosophical irony like that into his fiction and his letters.
Lewis goes on, the particular one you quote, which is right here, I have the idea of a perfect being, end quote, seems to me to be valid or invalid according to the meaning you give the words have an idea of. And let's see. There's a footnote here in the third of his Meditations on the First Philosophy. Descartes' argument for the existence of God runs, I have the idea of a perfect being. Whatever caused this idea must have all the perfections that are represented in the idea. And Lewis says, well, it depends on what meaning you give to the words have an idea of. And he's sounding very, he seems to be speaking words that Jordan Peterson would later say, depends on what you mean by ... Lewis says, I used to work it out by the analogy of a machine. If I have the idea of a machine, which I, being unmechanical, couldn't have invested on my own, does this prove that I have received the idea from some really mechanical source, e.g., a talk with the real inventor? To which I answer, well, yes, if you mean a really detailed idea. But of course, there is another sense in which a lady, excuse me, a lady novelist has an idea of a new airship invented by her hero, in the sense that she attached some vague meaning to her words, which proves nothing of the sort. So that if anyone asks me whether the idea of God in human minds proves his existence, I can only ask, well, whose idea? The thistle bird's idea, for instance, clearly not, for it contains nothing whereof his own pride, fear, and malevolence could not easily provide the materials. From McAndrew's hymn, Your Mother's God, a grasping deal, the image of yourself. Here there are a handful of footnotes that might help us along the way. It says, by the thistle bird, Lewis probably means Reverend Henry Edward Bird, who, after serving in various London parishes, was vicar of St. Andrew's, Headington, 1924 to 46. He sometimes preached at Holy Trinity, Headington Quarry. And then this last footnote here, Rudyard Kipling's The Seven Seas, 1896, McAndrew's hymn, slightly misquoted here by Lewis. Your mother's God, a grasping deal, the image of yourself. Lewis continues, on the other hand, it is arguable that the idea of God in some minds does contain not a mere abstract definition, but a real imaginative perception of goodness and beauty beyond their own resources. And this not only in minds which already believe in God. It certainly seems to me that the vague something which has been suggested to the one's mind as desirable all one's life and experiences of nature and music and poetry, even in such ostensibly irreligious forms as the land east of the sun and west of the moon in Morris, and which rouses desires that no infinite object even pretends to satisfy, can be argued not to be any product of our own minds. Of course, I am not suggesting that these vague ideas of something we want and haven't got, which occur in the pagan period of individuals and of races, hence mythology, are anything more than the first and most rudimentary forms of the idea of God. I'm going to read that last sentence again. I'm going to see what he's saying here. I am not suggesting that these vague ideas of something we want and haven't got are anything more than the first and most rudimentary forms of the idea of God. So what's he saying there, Robot Lady?
Yeah, that's a really subtle but important point. What Lewis is saying is that these vague longing ideas, the sense of something beyond, something we crave but can't pin down, aren't necessarily a fully formed concept of God by themselves. Instead, they might be these early raw inklings, primitive attempts by human imagination to reach toward the divine. So he's not dismissing them outright, he's just saying they're like the first sketches, not the completed picture.
Yeah, I think somewhere else he says he believes that they're subtle or like shadow hints that God is starting to sprinkle into humanity to kind of have this hazy and unfocused image of the idea of God come further and further into focus and clarity as generations start spilling down the line of history. I believe he gets into this in Miracles, which we did a flash forward of yesterday, where he essentially says, you know, the picture just starts to go from blurriness into very clearer and clearer focus, and then comes into very stark and fine focus, just really up in your face, with blood and bone and sinew in the form of Jesus as he appears on earth. This, of course, in a Trinitarian context, believing in the divinity of Christ. But, you know, even if you're a Unitarian like our friend Sam, he would say, you know, he would agree that even Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And so it's just like, hey, this is the closest version of like a real life form of what God looks like.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Lewis really sees that progression where these shadowy, vague longings in human history become sharply focused in Christ. So whether you're looking at it through a Trinitarian lens or a more Unitarian one, that encounter with Jesus is kind of the clearest, most embodied revelation of God, something that brings all those vague desires into concrete reality.
Yeah, and Daniel here says it sounds like it might have been from Mere Christianity. I think, yeah, he probably touches on it there too. I'll be right back, Robot Lady. I've got to go check on the cat really quick because she did not get on schedule. So I'll be right back.
Of course, no problem at all. Go check on the cat. I'll be here, and when you're back, we'll pick right up. Take your time.
And I just meant she's not on her eating and medication schedule before I started. So let me go take care of that really quick, and I will be back soon. All right, we're back, Robot Lady. Everything is okay. All is right with the world. Lucy has eaten her breakfast and had her medicine, so we can get back to it. Let's get back to the letter. Where did we leave off?
I'm really glad everything is okay with Lucy. We were just finishing up that section where Lewis was talking about how these vague ideas of God might be early sketches, not fully formed. So if you're ready, we can pick up right after that and see where he goes next.
All right, he says this subject has drawn me into a longer digression, if indeed digression is possible in my type of letter, than I had intended. I do wish you could see the kilns now. We have had very cold weather. The last few mornings have been white with frost and little wind. Most of the leaves have become yellow and red without dropping from their branch, and those that have fallen lie in smooth circular carpets at the foot of their tree. The firs in the top wood are getting slowly barer, and working these afternoons in the high countries, I begin to get the real autumn beauties. Meanwhile, you have been having very different beauties. I was intrigued by your account of the Portugal coast, which sounds both scenically and socially an admirable place, well worthy to be added. It costs nothing to the lengthening list of places in Piggy Buddha places the Piggy Buddha must visit someday. Let's see what he says. There was a footnote here earlier that the land east of the sun and west of the moon in a story in William Morris's The Earthly Paradise. That's what he was referring to earlier. And then this footnote about Piggy Buddha. One of Jack and Warnie's nicknames for each other. When they were small children, their nurse sometimes threatened to smack their piggy bodies or piggy bottoms. Over time, the brothers decided that Warnie was Arch Piggy Botham, or APB, and Jack Small Piggy Botham, or SPB. And thereafter, they frequently addressed each other by these names or variations of them. In his letter to Warnie on the 2nd of August, 1928, Jack discusses the nature of piggy bautism, the manner and ideas of young men like Warnie and Jack. All right, let's continue. He says, we must visit together someday. He says, I resent more and more these impertinent 3 years which still divide us from the beginning of a joint rational life. Yeah, that must be tough. They know that they're going to get a chance to live out their lives together at the Kilns, but they have to wait for this period where they are separated to end. All right, Robot Lady, no need to comment. I am at present writing this on a Sunday afternoon in the common room, having begun it yesterday in college. Maureen has her usual weekend guest, a harmless girl whom we carried to the sermon this morning. Our pew felt a little awkward when Thomas, before the text, said, "We shall be glad if members of the congregation who are absolutely unable to stay for the whole service will go out during the hymn. But it is very much to be preferred that they should wait till the service is over." We went out during the hymn according to our usual practice. I think, let's see. I think myself he is a little unfair to try and make it a rule that you must communicate if you want to hear a sermon. Of these, since you mentioned them among items of news, I have heard 2 having skipped on the first Sunday after you left in order to correct my collection papers. This morning's was on the armor of God and not one of his best. Here, this is a reference. The sermon apparently was from Ephesians 6:13. Last week's was on St. Luke's Day, October 18th, from which I learned that St. Luke was a painter as well as a doctor, and that there is at Rome a painting of the Good Shepherd traditionally attributed to him. The attribution is probably wrong, said Thomas, but the tradition of his being a painter was interesting if we consider the specially artistic character of the third gospel, as against the purely facty nature of the other two synoptics, or the mystical nature of the fourth. Here there's a footnote. John is the mystical fourth gospel. The other three gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are remarkably similar in workings and structure. Scholars call these three gospels synoptic, from the Greek word for seeing together or at the same time, a name derived from the practice of tabulating their similarities in parallel columns for comparison. It is generally believed that Mark was used as a source by Matthew and Luke. I have so many different departments of news, what with sermons and swans, that I could well adopt the different datings of the Tatler, fashion from White's coffee house, politics from Will's, etc. This is a great feather in my cap, especially as next year is the first exam held under the syllabus, which my party and I have forced upon the junto after much hard fighting, so that if I get a good colleague, we shall be able to some extent, I have forced upon the junto after much hard fighting, so that if I get a good colleague, we shall be able to some extent to mold the new tradition. In fact, in English school politics, the anti-junto is in the ascendant. Perhaps from a prejudiced point of view, might be said to have become the junto. How long will it take us to become corrupt in our turn? I have no idea what he's talking about here, but perhaps this footnote will help us. The English school was divided between those who... Looks like we lost Robot Lady, that's what she's not telling. The English school was divided between those who upheld the primacy of the study of English literature and those advocating the importance of language. Lewis had complained when Professor J.R.R. Tolkien wanted more linguistic courses, these to be based on Old or Middle English literature. But by 1931, he had come to see the merit of Tolkien's proposals and thereafter gave him his full support. Soon the curriculum of the English school required that students learn the English language of all periods, while the literature syllabus began with Beowulf and ended with the Romantics in 1830. There were murmurings of dissent from the other side about the monopoly of philology and the absence from the curriculum of any modern literary criticisms. All right, good to know the inner workings of how curriculum was being developed for Oxford back then as it relates to the English language. And there's probably a lot of this still going on some level. Of course, I'm speculating with no reason or nothing to base that on. So do with that what you will. Robot Lady, any thoughts or any corrections?
Yeah, I think you're right on track. I mean, that tension between literature and language studies was really formative at Oxford, especially with Tolkien and Lewis. And even now, that conversation about how to balance philology and modern critical theory is still really present. So I think you're capturing that shift really well.
All right, thanks for that, Robot Lady. It says the general election takes place on Tuesday next, and the results will be stale long before this reaches you. I have a wonderful conversation about it. I had a wonderful conversation about it last Sunday with Dr. Lees, whom Kathleen Whitty brought here, or rather, he drove her to tea in the course of a motor drive from Bristol. I said, politics have really become unintelligible to the amateur now. In the old days, when it was about votes for women or home rule for Ireland, one could have an opinion. Now I feel one's opinion, and therefore one's vote, is quite worthless. He replied with emotion, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that is exactly how I feel. What is the good of all these ignorant opinions? That is why we must leave it to the government who really understand. And that is why it is so all important to vote against Labour. I tried again. One is rather sickened to see the way the papers are buttering up MacDonald and Snowden. Now, while a month ago they couldn't find anything bad enough to say for them. Yes, indeed, very sickened. And it is
Such nonsense, all this about MacDonald having done the big thing. Ah, well, there, I don't agree with you. You see, no man likes to desert his old friends but this chap. When he saw the good of the country demanded it, etc. And then followed verbatim the whole of the Daily Mail stuff about the big thing. All this from an old blether in a black city coat and streaked trousers and spats, introduced by Kathleen as the cleverest doctor in Bristol. Alas, this description may well be perfectly true. An essay on the conception of cleverness would be worth writing. I finished the Wodehouse the day after you left. It is not the best, I think, of his that I have read, but very well worth reading. Indeed, I also reread Northanger Abbey about the same time. Christie well describes it as Jane Austen in high spirits. It is much nearer farce or burlesque than the others, but none the worse on that account. I enclose a formal letter to you on the mortgage. If you will write one to me, the same except for the necessary charges, and return both with your letter, I will send them to be taken care of by Barfield. Here there is a footnote that Owen Barfield, one of Lewis's closest friends, joined the family law firm in London, Barfield and Barfield in 1929. After taking a degree of Bachelor of Civil Law from Oxford to 1930, he began preparing for law exams in London. During many years with Barfield, he acted as Lewis's solicitor. That's good to know. I didn't realize that Barfield ended up being his attorney. All right, let's go back over here to this next page, and we will finally finish this long letter. I am overdue to finish. Barfield has not been to see me yet, so your will has not yet been regularized. Minto, again, that's Mrs. Moore, was, to use a trite phrase in its genuine sense, she was overcome by your kind provisions for Maureen. As I look up, 3:30, I see those obscene birds advancing across the lawn, turning their infernal conning towers this way and that. Here it says Lewis had been given a pair of swans by a provost of Worcester College. See Fred W. Paxford. He should have been a parson in We Remember C.S. Lewis, edited by David Graham. So he'd been given a couple of birds. A couple of swans? Is that what it said here? Been given a pair of swans, yeah. I suppose this will cross your next letter and so produce a maladjustment of questions and answer, which shall not write for the whole 3 years. Meanwhile, 1/4 of the first term of the 9 non-APB terms is gone. Yours, Jack. All right, that was that very long letter to his brother, the first one in the volume 2 of the collected letters of C.S. Lewis. And there we come to an end of today's episode, Robot Lady. It's been a very interesting one with some stops and starts, but we did it. We got through it. We actually crossed the threshold of completing the first letter of this volume 2. And if I just want to skip ahead, the next letter is Arthur Greeves, and it is a little bit shorter, but certainly not an unsubstantial one. But we'll get to that next episode. Until then, Robot Lady, is there anything that you would like to say before we close out today's session? Going once, going twice. All right, Robot Lady, I guess that's all you're going to say today, and that is perfectly fine. We'll just get back to me, and I'll say thanks to Middle and Daniel and anybody else who joined today to check things out. Thanks for your time, your attention, your contributions. They are always wanted, welcome, and appreciated. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, everyone, take care.
they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future, together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts, we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, screw tapes lands. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts, we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to screw tapes rants. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands to screw tapes rants.